So Dan, tell me what's the role of insurance in commercial property transaction?
Well, some legal problems simply can't be easily resolved in a transaction. When there's issues that are perhaps time critical or there's a negligible risk, then insurance can often step in and play that role of giving buyers and tenants a safe passage to premises. They can also be put in place fairly instantly and in some cases are more cost effective than alternative solutions.
What sort of risks are covered?
Well, if you look at the sort of things that might come up in a commercial property transaction, for example, there might be difficulties over rights of way, either because the property is subject to rights of way that might cause a problem, whether or not they're used, or because the property depends on a right of way. There might be restrictions on a building or particular use of the property, and the person whose permission is needed to amend that simply can't be found, or perhaps may be unwilling to do so. Then there's the local authority with requirements for planning permissions and building regulations consents. They're not always obtained when they ought to be, either because owners are unaware of the requirements, or in some cases because they simply decide that it's more cost effective to insure rather than take that battle on head on.
And typically, how much do these insurance policies cost?
Well, it's a really difficult question because in some cases, for risks that have already arisen, perhaps nothing has happened for many, many years and there's no likelihood realistically perhaps of a claim, but it's always there in the background. The cost might be £30-40. Going up to some major risks on substantial developments, you might be talking about £30,000-40,000. So it very much depends on the type of risk, the property value, whether it's a past or a future event you're insuring against. But most policies tend to be for past risks and tend to be around the £50 to £200 range.
And could insurance replace the role of lawyers like yourselves?
Well, you might look at established property markets like the United States, where the role of an attorney in some cases is simply finding the best title insurance policy on offer and then implementing the transaction after that. Some UK non-mainstream mortgage transactions work in a very similar way, with very limited instructions being given to the lawyers. It tends to work best, insurance, when you're trying to cover a financial risk rather than making sure that there is no problem that might cause a particular sort of other upheaval or a physical issue. For example, somebody who is purchasing a house for their own occupation may not want simply a financial remedy, because there might be an emotional and a psychological cost of finding that there is a problem which then needs to be resolved further down the line.
And is there a best time to insure?
Well, certainly the earlier the better, because the policy will be active against any new claims that arise after the policy's been put into place. Some policies will cost a little bit more the earlier you put them in place. It's a very sophisticated market, the legal insurance market, and there are very few issues that do not have some sort of insurance-based solution.
And are there any limitations to this type of insurance?
Yes, and it's really important to make sure that those limitations are observed and that those who rely on these policies are aware of them. And as a solicitor, it's very often my job to ensure that somebody knows about the limitations of the insurance policy. For example, where the policy doesn't cover the specific risk. If you have a building that doesn't comply with planning requirements and you have a planning insurance policy, that won't necessarily cover you if you require building regulations consent for the same thing. It may not cover the specific loss. You may have a right against, and you might have insured against any legal claims that might arise, but you won't have made sure that that dodgy extension is any better than when it was built in the first place. And also one major limitation, which can cause huge issues, is where the insured person actually increases the risk. There is a saying in insurance that you don't insure a burning building. Well, if you contact the third party who might have the benefit of the claim, then it won't surprise anybody to know that that might affect the ability to claim on a policy which is designed to cover exactly that. And one other limitation is where policyholders try and sort out a problem themselves. Perhaps they don't report a claim to insurers. And I think that's common across the whole insurance market.
And finally, you can obviously help with anybody who's got an issue relating to insurance.
Well, certainly if it comes up as part and parcel of our property transactions that we deal with, then we can use insurance as part of our toolkit to be able to help and assist people. So yes, absolutely.